A thing of horror happened 2,000 years ago. On a hill outside of the walls of Jerusalem, Jesus Christ, who was God in the flesh, died on a Roman cross. And yet we call this Friday good. It is a good day because on this day, the world saw in the horror of the death of Jesus the unfathomable love of God for the universe. The church calls this good day the axis mundi, the axis of the world. This is the moment in created history around which every other moment turns. The cross is the central event in human history, indeed in created history. Since the creation was formed, sin has destined the world and all that is in it to death and to loss and to eternal separation from God. But by the cross, God reverses it all. God causes creation to make an about face. He doesn't do so by snapping his fingers and granting us cheap grace. He doesn't do it by ignoring sin and making justice a joke. He doesn't do it by denying our freedom and our personhood and turning us into robots. But rather, he takes our sin as seriously as he takes his love for us. And he pays the unimaginable debt by dying on the cross in order to reconcile you to him. That's why there's a cross hanging above our altar and not some vague shape of an empty tomb. That's why this church is shaped like a cross and not like an auditorium or a Roman amphitheater. That's why we cross ourselves. We do not make the sign of the stone that rolled away. Because in this shape, we remember the shape of God's love for us. In that shape, the shape of a device of torture, of mutilation, of execution, we see the design of all that there is. God made us, and when we fell into sin and become subject to evil and death, he reshaped the world in the shape of the cross, that we might always remember the humility of the God of love. The church calls today the Axis Mundi and not Sunday, just 2 days from now. Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd? Folks flock to church for Easter, for the resurrection. It's the resurrection that gives life to our funerals and hope in our hospital rooms and grace to our suffering. And while it is true that the resurrection is the best news the world has ever heard, have you ever imagined that the existence of Jesus on the other side of the grave was in some ways inevitable? For if Jesus was truly God, then it makes complete sense, doesn't it, that death could not contain him. Christ was God in the flesh. What chance did the tomb have of holding him back, of winning a final victory over him? He was the one through whom all things were created. Now, don't misunderstand me. The resurrection is a marvel and a wonder and a joy, and I cannot wait to preach on its wonders on Sunday. But today, we must stand slack-jawed at the miracle. The miracle is that God so loved the world that he died. That's the event that makes us gasp. The cross is the marvel. The cross is the miracle. The cross is the utter paradoxical impossibility that has no compare in all of existence. Some of you have already been here this morning to walk the stations of the cross. Some of you will do it later this afternoon. All of us in a moment will kneel before this wooden cross, this thing that sparks our imagination. In so many ways, Good Friday and all of its wonder is just beyond human speech. It defies the capacity of a human mouth to speak of what God did, that God would be like this. And so we kneel before an image, letting it do what words can't do. We just stop trying to put into words the paradox that God dies, and we simply do what Pilate tells us to do today. Behold the man. Behold your king. We can see Isaiah's prophecies coming true. As the servant of God, Jesus is lifted up and marred beyond human semblance. He's chastised, he's bruised, he's wounded, so that you will always know that God understands human suffering and that he offered himself as the final answer to every human question. Behold him dragging his cross up Golgotha. Behold him trusting his Father even to death. Behold what it costs God to bring life and light back into the world. See the wounds by which we are healed. All of theology eventually runs out of words and simply becomes praise. So let us now kneel down before the axis of the world and praise the God who loved us so much that he would die for a sinner like you and a sinner like me. Amen.